The views and opinions expressed in the Distracted Librarians podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Bloomfield Township Public Library, Bloomfield Community Television, the Birmingham Area Cable Board, or its producers or production staff.
Hello and welcome. We're the Distracted Librarians, your friendly neighborhood bookworms who can't resist the siren call of movies, video games, music, and everything else in the pop culture universe.
Think of this podcast as a digital campfire where we share our latest obsessions, analyze the hidden depths of our favorite distractions, and maybe rediscover the joy of reading in between.
So, if you're a fellow media junkie, a book lover, or someone looking for a fun, engaging escape from your daily grind, you've come to the right place.
Sit back, relax, and prepare to get delightfully distracted with us.
Hey everybody, today we are going to talk about intellectual freedom. And this is going to be a different podcast episode because this isn't going to be all about our opinions and our thoughts and all of that good stuff. Well, maybe a little bit of that. But
realistically, I don't think we can turn that off.
Yes, I don't think we can. As a group, we can't really turn off our opinions and our thoughts. But this is going to be really informative, and I think it's an important topic.
And I think one thing that we can preface this by saying is that this is the Distracted Librarians podcast, of course, but this is a less distracted and more librarian topic. And I
That's
think
a really good distinction.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's and not because I'm like, oh, look at me, like what a funny quip I've just made. But I think that it's really important because it was not funny. But I think it's important that we recognize that as librarians we have a specific obligation in our profession, and we have specific education and experience to talk about some of these things and to support some of these things as a professional duty.
Yes, absolutely. You know? We have a lot of fun doing our jobs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we also have a responsibility to our community and to ourselves, and our own feelings about freedom in this particular way. So this is going to be a conversation about the other stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
In the background that we're thinking about when we're having fun. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So what is intellectual freedom? Intellectual freedom is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It provides for free access to all expressions of ideas through which any and all sides of a question, cause, or movement may be explored. This information is from the American Library Association, which is kind of like the
governing body.
The governing body of all librarians and libraries. We really look to them to give us our code of conduct and how we learn to behave as librarians, as professionals.
Yeah. So some ethical guiding principles are the foundation here that's provided for our professional use so that we can support our communities through our work.
Absolutely.
And a lot like, government, there's a national, which is the ALA, there's the Michigan Library Association, there's our individual libraries, code and collection development policy, and all of that are things that we have to consider.
Yes.
But also each smaller section takes a lot of advice from the higher ones when we were making our policies.
Absolutely.
Right. And some of that too is when we are in our master's programs to become librarians, we're, students at accredited universities and programs that support our learning and our acknowledgement of these concepts too.
Yeah.
So it really does trickle down from the very, very top to, to the training period before we even become librarians.
Yeah.
It's these are the guiding forces behind what you're going to be learning, what you're going to be putting into practice when you enter the profession officially.
Yeah.
So,
and I think library school really does focus on that when they're like, oh, we have all of these students that are here. These are the reasons why we do what we do.
yes.
And so, I don't know. I think that's kind of great. Like, when
Yeah.
I was in library school and they were like, this is why we do what we do, I was like, yes, that's why we do what we do. Like, I knew I was in the right place.
Yeah.
You know what I
yes,
mean?
yes. I know what you mean. Yep.
I think that's the biggest thing that library school is really, really beneficial for in terms of getting the degree. In working at a few libraries, the way that each individual library functions, you sort of have to learn on the job.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes,
what
well
you
said.
learn in library school itself is going to be the broader picture, how to conduct a reference interview, how to keep all of these things in mind.
How to adhere to a collection development policy, how to adapt your library service to your individual constituency. So yeah, like you said, Drew, the broader strokes are there that you then apply to the community in question that you are responsible in serving. And I think that is, I mean, in as much as we all like love books and media, we didn't go to library school because we like to read.
Well, no, okay.
You know what I mean?
It's one of the
You know
first
what I mean?
things they
It's one of
tell
the
you
first thing- yeah,
in
like-
classes.
Yeah, is like, you know, I know we all are readers, etc., but that is a home activity when you're at work, when you are serving as a librarian, you are responsible for not your reading or your material selection, it's someone else. You know,
Absolutely.
So that's a big part of
Yeah.
what our responsibility is.
So we know what intellectual freedom is based on that little blurb I just said. But why is it a fundamental right, and why is it important in democratic society? According to the ALA again, intellectual freedom is a core value of the library profession and a basic right in our democratic society. A publicly supported library provides free, equitable, and confidential access to information for all people of its community. And that is, like, so important. I think all of us feel very strongly about really making sure that materials are available for everybody, so we serve our community in the best way possible.
When I was like, I'm going to be a librarian, people are like, why? It's that access to information. It's that fundamental understanding that everybody, regardless of a lot of things, should be able to access information. And that's the whole reason public libraries became a thing and continue to be a thing, is so the public has that access. It's not locked away just to university students or just to people of a certain profession. It is publicly accessible.
Well, and I think too that an access to information, I had a lot of people, and maybe we all have experienced this at some point, where people said, well, aren't libraries going away because everything's digital now? Like, you know, books are digital, or there's ebooks or e-readers or whatever, and it's just like, that's not the point of, you know, that, like, books are, the library has long since ceased to be the place where the books are kept. You
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, of course
Primarily, yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah.
I mean, like, of course that is a real thing, obviously. But there are so many other types of information that are encompassed within that,
Yeah.
and including information in books, or including that. But it is a much bigger picture.
Well,
than
we've had to adapt
yes.
or become obsolete, and I think libraries have done a really good job of keeping themselves relevant. Even though everybody, you know, now many people have computers or access to the internet, and Google can do so many things, well, the library is still there. We're still available. We can still help you kind of sort through all of that information and make better decisions.
We're still a free access point, and I think
Yes, I
that's
was
the
gonna
big
say that too.
the big thing is where, yes, a lot of books are digital, and you can, you know, get ebooks downloaded to your e-reader or your iPad or whatever. You also can access so many with your library card, and that is a community-funded public resource that is available to you. Additionally, you can get information just through library programs. We have so many informational programs, and that's not necessarily something that you would be able to access outside of that the same way.
Sure.
At least for free.
Yeah.
Right.
At least for free.
So it's that situating ourselves where we're getting we are connecting people to the information in different ways, in different methods, and less so being we have all the information right here, but
Right.
it's helping people connect to it, sort through it, that sort of thing.
And being
Absolutely.
able to, as librarians, actually serve as that human reference point between this and this. You know, either like, well, I'm looking for a resource. You know, what service would I use to do this, and this, or look this up, or whatever. You know, or like I'm having an issue with even something simple, like I'm having an issue with Hoopla or whatever. How do I, you know, or what database might I use to, you know, look up this, and this information? Like a librarian can help facilitate that access for you as well.
And you might be able to find some of that information just through a Google search, but
Yeah.
sifting through a Google search
Yes.
Right.
would take a lot more time than searching through, you know, this. If we know this database is going to have that in that,
Yes.
being able to be like, okay, let's search here.
Right.
It's a much faster process than digging through 20 pages of Google results.
And potentially more accurate and more reliable.
Exactly.
Too,
Yes,
you know?
definitely.
But that's my own like tangent for another, you know. But,
So let's talk about censorship and challenges. So in 2023, the number of titles targeted for censorship increased by 92% in libraries. It is groups or individuals requesting the censorship of often dozens or hundreds of titles that created this surge in numbers. And that number is really startling,
yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
definitely.
So is that, because I see we're reading that stat again, I think ALA?
Yes.
Yeah. So was that stat just from 2022 to 23?
I believe so.
Essentially doubled?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't love that.
No, no. It's an interesting phenomenon, and I think it is something that is concerning for many people that work in libraries, because you know our ability to have this freedom of information is now being challenged in a way that it hasn't been challenged before, and it just makes us worry about how things are. But it's so important for us to be able to, to be the place where you can go and have access to anything that you need
Yeah.
to learn about things. So
Because information in this particular context is an unbiased definition. So we are not. And even the ALA is not as attributing any sort of opinion or bias towards information, quote unquote information. It's literally just access to material and information as you see fit.
absolutely.
So we are not able to, nor would we want to ascribe any sort of specific, leaning towards anything that we provide, but it is that it's not any one particular item or one particular bit and piece of information. It's what is championed here is the access rather than the item.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So, and I think that that's
Yep.
something that is a little bit blurry to folks who are outside of the profession or who aren't super. It's the access. It's not it may not be the specific item in question.
Yeah.
So
That's what it comes down to a lot, is that we're not like advocating that this book be read by you or by your family or by this community in particular.
oh right, yeah, we're not advocating that anybody read anything in particular.
Yeah,
Like that's your business to decide what you do or do not want to read.
Yeah, and we're trying to be the middleman to connect people with the content that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I'd like to skip ahead a little bit to how many libraries have policies that cover collection development.
Yeah.
Which ours is available on our website if anyone is interested in looking at that. But really, it goes back to the fact that, we just want to have the items available in case there's a person that would be valuable to, right?
Yeah.
So, why are librarians qualified to select materials? I think this is a question that some people may ask, and we did talk about library school and how, we are trained to do specific things in our job. So we have a master's degree in library and information science. Some people don't know we have a master's degree.
Or that it's such a specific, like, master's degree for libraries.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yep.
So, we have additional training specifically in working in libraries and offering these services.
And one of the core classes, if you're intending to go into public libraries especially, is a collection development class that
Yes.
goes into
Yes.
how to make selections, how to, again, look at what your community needs and make sure you're making selections based on what your community needs.
Absolutely. So our schooling offers specialized training in evaluating, selecting, and recommending materials. But while we have these qualifications, we always try to put the final decision of whether or not something is appropriate in the hands of the families or the people who are checking out the items.
Absolutely.
So, like, we would never, put a book in someone's hand and be like, "This is for you."
Yeah.
You have to check this
we
out.
really,
You have to read it. No.
especially in the youth department, it is so vital for us to remind parents that if there's a topic that concerns you, please read the book before you hand it over to your child, because there are things that are absolutely important to each individual family.
Yeah.
So I am not able to make that decision for other families, and I don't want to. I would offer
right.
this back to the
Yeah.
parent and say, "This is a great book, but please read it first
Yeah, and-
before you."
Oh yeah,
give it to your child.
I remember talking to one of my friends who's a librarian as well, and she said the same thing where she was doing a like reader's advisory for a student, I think maybe like older middle school, early high school, and this student was looking at some of those titles that they had said like, oh, you might be interested in this or this based on things that you've read before, and the student said, well, my parents are sort of strict with some of the things that I'm reading or watching. Like, are these going to be okay for that? And my friend said, I'm not able to make that determination for you. Like, if that's something that you want to discuss with your parents or whatever, like,
Yeah.
You can take them, you can take the titles, think about it, whatever. But I'm not able to speak on
Absolutely.
what that means for you.
Absolutely.
What that means for you and
Yep.
your family. So.
And I wouldn't want to.
No,
it's not- yeah.
We provide access, and we do readers advisory. We do recommend items sometimes. But I am really conscious of making sure that families know that they absolutely have a choice in the matter.
Oh, of
you know?
course. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a core part of what the reference interview is.
Uh-huh.
It's if they come up saying they're looking for a certain type of book, or just the hardest question that I ever have to deal with is, can you recommend a good book?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Without any information besides
Let me
that.
ask you my 20 questions to boil down what you're actually looking for. And
Yeah.
we do that based on what they've read in the past that they've liked, what sort of things they would want to avoid as the reader. And that can come down to content or specific tropes, anything like that. And then I will always try and give 2, 3, 4 recommendations if I'm able to think of them.
Sure.
And say, hey, these are some things that I liked, or some things that I know the community has engaged with very strongly up to this point. Please assess for yourself.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I always try to when I give a recommendation, or I take a book off the shelf and bring it to a patron, I always say, like, read the back, flip through it. If it seems like it would interest you, awesome. If not, then we'll keep looking for something. But ultimately that determination is I'm not reading it. You're reading is supposed to be enjoyable and informative. If
Yeah.
this does not meet the bill for you, like, you can determine that, and it's your right to determine that, of course.
Sure.
So.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's kind of I think one of the other things that is useful that people may not even know exists is also through the American Library Association, the Library Bill of Rights, and it does assist in guiding libraries and librarians in upholding some of these intellectual freedoms and some of these access points that we've been talking about. Some of them, and I won't read the whole thing. Again, it's available on ala.org. And if anybody is interested in finding it. But just some of the information in brief is the American Library Association affirms that all libraries are forums for information and ideas, and that the following basic policies should guide their service. So like we've just been saying, these are just, like, I'm just going to bullet point portions of some of them. Again, it's all available online. The books and other library resources should be provided for the interest, information, and enlightenment of all people of the community the library serves. So this is one thing that I think you might have mentioned this, Drew, before, when you have to assess your specific community and your specific constituency to when you are working in a library, is learning what your patronage is interested in, what kind of access they need or what kind of access they're interested in. And that's a really important part of that process too. Yep. The Bill of Rights also states libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues, which kind of ties into that same thing. You want your collection to be community relevant, historically relevant, currently relevant, to encompass a lot of voices and perspectives that are current. And then libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. And again, in our context, censorship is anything that attempts to challenge or to negate that access point that we've been discussing. Yeah. So again, it may not refer to any particular title or author or service or whatever in our context. It's that action.
Absolutely.
I think the one that spoke out to me most from what you said was that whole section of offering many viewpoints into the same thing. Yeah. One of our core things that we're trying to do is to create a diverse and inclusive collection that makes it so anyone that comes into the library looking for something is going to be able to find some example of it. And that fits both the fiction collection of reading a book by an author who shares an identity that someone may have or with a character that someone may have. It goes into the nonfiction section of making sure that we have information available, looking at different things from multiple angles. That's really the core of what we're trying to do when we build that collection, is make sure that anyone who comes in has something that they can take off the shelf.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and feels that their voice is heard alongside other voices as well.
Yeah. It's so important to realize that not all books are for everybody. Yeah. And there are books that, that represent maybe somebody that lives very far around the world, and maybe a person from that place just moved here and is feeling homesick or whatever. And especially in the kids' collection, I feel like that is just so important, that representation of having, a book that has characters that look like you or feel like you do or have had an experience like yours. That's how we create healthy children that grow into being healthy adults.
It's very powerful to see yourself in a book. And so making sure that everybody is able to have that experience is vital.
Yeah, I mean, even as an adult, I've some of the books and movies that I've connected with, as I've become more comfortable with the person I am, strike me more when I see someone who's represented or speaks in along the same line that I do. Now, I'm not talking about like verbally, but just, and as a child, which can be a very isolating time anyway, as you realize that you exist alongside all these other people who are also existing, to have your identity or your thoughts or your experience represented in print, I think can be very validating for people.
And it's the reverse of that too, where like I am a white man living in the 2000s. I have a very specific viewpoint on the world, and it's so important to step out of that in some of the things that I read too, and make sure that I'm reading books by women and by people of color and by people who have other identities than mine. to really figure out a more globalized way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and it does speak to that, to the community aspect of everything, because we are one person in a sea of a million, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is nice to have that opportunity to have resources available, that if that is something that is important to you in your reading or your watching or whatever, that you have that opportunity to learn from someone else, or to learn about, you know, other places, other people, other ideas, other perspectives, if you want to. I think that's, having it there doesn't necessarily mean that you need to engage with it, or that you're being encouraged to engage with it if you don't prefer to. But for those people who want to do that, for whatever that is, if they so choose, that is also fine. Like that option is so important.
Definitely.
So one of the reasons that we're talking about this, and this episode is airing when it's airing, is that Banned Book Week is coming up. And Banned Books Week was started in 1982 in response to a surge in the number of challenges to books in libraries and bookstores and schools. It's usually held at the end of September, although it's not always. I know sometimes it's been like mid-October as well. But it's an annual event that highlights the value of free and open access to information, which is what we've been talking about today. It brings together the bookish world. People talk about it in libraries, in schools, in bookstores, but authors talk about it, readers talk about it, especially with social media today. You see a lot of conversation during that time.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
On TikTok, on Tumblr, on any social media site. And it's always interesting because you get so much conversation that happens then that doesn't happen like through the rest of the year as much. But it really is a interesting time to see everyone's opinions and hear everyone talk about different things. It should be noted that it's in some places not being referred to as Banned Book Week anymore, because it was seen as kind of celebrating the challenges, which it wasn't the goal. The goal is to celebrate intellectual freedom. So many libraries and bookstores are kind of renaming it themselves. But yeah, it's a really solid thing to have something every year that kind of reminds us about why it's important and what, you know, what from the past has happened and what we can look at here in the present and moving forward into the future.
Absolutely. And honestly, all of the banned books that I've read, they're pretty awesome.
Honestly, agreed.
Yeah, same.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to this episode of Distracted Librarians. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Distracted Librarians.
If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to reach out to us at distracted@btpl.org.
Until then, keep those pages turning and those screens lighting up.
We'll catch you in the next episode.